A group of friends decided to go on a weekend getaway and rented a cabin in a remote area through Airbnb. The cabin was nestled in the heart of a dense forest, and it promised a tranquil and peaceful retreat. However, as soon as they arrived at the cabin, they began to feel uneasy. The cabin seemed older than it appeared in the photos, and the air was damp and musty. Despite their reservations, they decided to make the best of their situation and settled in for the night. As the night wore on, the group began to hear strange noises coming from the surrounding forest. At first, it sounded like footsteps, but then it became clear that something was moving through the woods towards the cabin. The friends quickly realized that they were not alone and began to panic. They tried to lock the doors and windows, but the lock seemed old and rusty, and some of them wouldn't even work. The group soon realized that they were trapped in the cabin, with whatever was outside closing in on them. As the night progressed, the sounds grew louder and more frequent. The group began to hear whispers and murmurs coming from outside the cabin. It was as if someone, or something, was trying to communicate with them. As dawn approached, the noises subsided, and the group finally dared to venture outside. What they saw chilled them to the bone. The trees surrounding the cabin were marked with strange symbols, and there was a feeling of malevolence in the air. They quickly packed their bags and fled the cabin, vowing never to return. But the horror had followed them back home. Strange occurrences began to happen around them, and they soon realized that they had brought something back with them from the cabin. The group tried to forget about their experience, but they knew that they had unlocked something that should have stayed locked. They had inadvertently stumbled upon an ancient evil, and they would forever be haunted by their decision to rent the cabin through Airbnb. The strange occurrences that had followed the group home began to escalate quickly. The first night back, they all experienced nightmares of being chased through the forest by an unseen force. The second night, they heard scratching sounds on their doors and windows, as if something was trying to claw its way inside. By the third night, the group knew that they needed to take action. They did some research on the cabin and discovered that it was built on an ancient burial ground. Legend had it that the spirits of the dead still roamed the forest, seeking revenge on anyone who disturbed their rest. The group decided to try to appease the spirits by performing a cleansing ritual. They gathered together in the living room, lit candles, and began to chant. At first, nothing seemed to happen, but then the candles began to flicker, and a cold breeze swept through the room. Suddenly, one of the group members was violently thrown across the room. The others screamed in terror as they watched as an invisible force seemed to be attacking their friend. But then, just as suddenly as it had started, the attack stopped, and the group member was left battered and bruised, but alive. After that night, the strange occurrences stopped, and the group members were finally able to sleep peacefully. However, they knew that they could never forget what had happened to them. They had been reminded that some places should never be disturbed, and some spirits should never be awakened. The group members went their separate ways, but they would always remember their experience at the cabin. They never spoke about it to anyone else, knowing that no one else would believe them. But they knew the truth, and they knew that they had faced a horror that most people could never imagine. A couple decided to take a romantic weekend getaway and booked a cozy cabin in the woods through Airbnb. They arrived at the cabin in the late afternoon and were immediately taken aback by how secluded and isolated the cabin was. It was the perfect location for a romantic and peaceful weekend. As they settled in for the night, the couple began to notice that there were strange markings on the walls that they hadn't noticed before. They looked like occult symbols, and the couple began to feel uneasy. However, they shrugged it off as just their imagination and decided to get some rest. In the middle of the night, the couple was awoken by strange noises coming from outside. It sounded like someone or something was scratching at the door. The couple was frightened, but they tried to reassure themselves that it was just an animal outside. However, as the scratching continued, it became clear that it was not an animal. The scratching turned into pounding, and the couple realized that someone or something was trying to break down the door. They huddled together in fear, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, the pounding stopped, and there was silence. The couple was too scared to move or even speak. But then, they heard a whisper in their ear, and they realized that they were not alone in the cabin. They turned around, but there was no one there. The couple tried to leave the cabin, but they found that the doors and windows were all locked from the outside. They were trapped. The couple spent the rest of the night huddled together, waiting for something to happen. As morning approached, the couple was finally able to escape the cabin. They ran to their car and drove away as quickly as they could. When they got home, they realized that they had left their camera behind in the cabin. When they reviewed the pictures on the camera, they were shocked to see that every photo they had taken was of them sleeping in the cabin. They had no memory of taking the photos, and they realized that they had been watched the entire time they were there. The couple never spoke about their experience again, but they never forgot the terror they had experienced in the secluded cabin they rented through Airbnb. A group of friends rented a beautiful beach house through Airbnb for their annual vacation. The house was gorgeous, with a stunning ocean view and all the amenities they could ask for. However, on their second night, things began to take a sinister turn. One of the friends, who had been exploring the house, discovered an old diary hidden in a drawer. The diary belonged to the previous owner of the beach house, who had passed away years ago. As they began to read the diary, they realized that the previous owner had been a deeply disturbed individual. The diary was filled with stories of dark rituals, human sacrifices, and summoning demons. The group was horrified, but they tried to reassure themselves that it was just the ramblings of a disturbed individual. However, as the night went on, strange things began to happen. The group heard strange whispers in the middle of the night, and they felt as if they were being watched. They tried to ignore it, but then they heard footsteps coming from the hallway. They all froze, unsure of what to do. Suddenly, the door to the room they were in opened, and a figure appeared in the doorway. It was the ghostly apparition of the previous owner of the beach house, and she was not pleased with the group's presence. The group screamed in terror and tried to run, but the ghostly figure was too powerful. The group was trapped in the beach house, and the ghostly apparition began to torment them in horrific ways. She would appear in their dreams and whisper dark secrets, she would move objects around the house, and she would create illusions that left the group unsure of what was real and what was not. The group tried to leave the beach house, but they found that the doors and windows were all locked from the outside. They were trapped, and they knew that they had to find a way to appease the angry spirit. They eventually found a way to break the curse by performing a ritual that involved burying the diary deep in the sand on the beach. As soon as the ritual was completed, the ghostly apparition disappeared, and the group was finally able to leave the beach house. However, the group would never forget the terror they experienced in the beach house rented through Airbnb. They knew that some places held dark secrets and should never be disturbed.